So I think one of the interesting points that Stephen raised in there was the human element in it, and what technical IT discussion panel would be complete without AI coming into it. What's the panel's view on the challenges, the opportunities of, in this particular context, AI being used for shaping future infrastructure, so infrastructure as code, and actually bringing that structure and that effectively repeatability into those models and how the infrastructure is designed?
I'm happy to start off on that one.
I think
I think one of the things that everybody is starting to realize, and it's fun watching the news stories in all these different areas. And I remember watching one, and it was a lady who used AI to help her build her court case in one of the courts in London. And so she asked the AI for some case material that, historical precedent case material that backed up her case. Standard lawyer thing, right? Quoting, well, in so-and-so versus so-and-so, the judge said, blah, 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 blah. So, she asked the AI, here's a bunch of stuff. She went into the court. She started presenting her case. It was a hallucination because AIs hallucinate a lot. As it turns out, even more than humans. None of those cases had actually existed. What the AI heard was, produce some case material that backs up my case. So it went, okay, and it produced it. It didn't go find it. Well, we're going to have a lot of those challenges over the coming few years. And back to where we started this conversation, secure by design. I think AI is an incredibly powerful tool used under the hands of a designer who has conscious intent over what he's creating. Because the AI is not going to replace that function anytime soon, right? As I said before, my crystal ball is about as good as anybody else's. Or are we going to get to the point where AI stops hallucinating and can be used for creating without oversight? Don't know. But at this point, what we know is that, yeah, AI hallucinates a lot. It's got a fantastic imagination. Now, that's going to be really useful for an intent-based designer because the AI is going to produce concepts and ideas that designer didn't have. But we can't leave it up to the AI to select the right one because it's not necessarily going to know what the best one is when you put all those other factors together. So for me, it's another tool in the toolbox. Would I like the AI to help me design routing tables in IPv6? Yes. Those are not fun, right? That is a lot of manual drudgery. Would I ask the AI to tell me how I should segregate my environment? Well, no, probably not, because that's a design intent based on me as the person in the organization understanding who my threat actors are, understanding where my risks are, understanding the systems that really are critical versus the systems that, if they go down for a couple days, I'll live. So it's how we use it is going to be the question. And I think we are going to see some people like that lady in her court case who attempt to push the AI too far, think they're getting a great result, and then find out after the fact, oops, that was a hallucination. That's not at all the result that we wanted because that design-based intent wasn't there.
Yeah, I think for me, so I typically see kind of artificial intelligence and machine learning applied in the context of kind of refined automation. And automation is fantastic for accelerating speed of response and fantastic for promoting consistency. The problem being, if you automate an inherently inefficient process or inherently inefficient architecture, you just get more inefficiency created faster than ever before, which is very seldom what you want. And for me, again, because I come from an architectural background, like design is almost fundamentally about kind of compromise and trade-offs. You can balance, as an example, performance versus cost efficiency very interestingly in an environment where you go, I want this thing to go as fast as it can conceivably go for all users, but I'd rather not pay the country's GDP for it each month. Yeah. That's a trade-off. At some point, you have to make a decision about where that slider stops. You factor in kind of security as another slider, and you say, I want proportionate or appropriate security. In whose judgment? is that proportionate or appropriate? What is the acceptable impact on user experience? What is the acceptable impact on cost profile? As soon as you factor in those variables, the design conversation is a very rich and very nuanced conversation that there is no fundamental best practice for. So there is anything that kind of draws from those models, draws on the kind of common denominators, and we know how things like load balancing and routing should work. You can absolutely automate those kind of things. What is the optimal balance between cost of running a service versus the user experience of it versus being able to protect it is a much more subjective discussion, which is not suitable to that kind of hands-off model. And I think it's through those, which comes fundamentally back to business value, operating cost, etc. You've got a budget, you have a spend envelope you have to exist within. You need to get best derived capability for your available funds and for the market or service that you're supporting. Very few of those things go into operating cost models, kind of cost dashboards, etc. around, but is that representing appropriate value? Because it's just a number on a graph most of the time. It's that graph is higher or lower than last month. If it's lower, great. If it's higher, I don't know, is that bad? Or did we deliver more value?
I think one of the other things, and it's a slight adjunct, Steve, that we talk about from an AI point of view is that AI, as Adam has said, is and Stephen said, is really good at taking lots of data and trying to make sense of it. The challenge you have now is, how do I give it that data in a secure way? Because I can't just say, there you go, AI bot, there's all my data, because essentially it's an open platform, right? So once you give it, it's gone. So I think that equally the question now that organizations have to look at is, how do I use AI efficiently and effectively to deliver me the outcomes I'm looking for, value creation, but I have sovereignty over what I let it look at, yeah, how I give it access to that data. And I think that's something that, again, people are going to struggle with over the next number of years. And I'm sure we're going to see lots of stories and horror stories come out in the press where people have just gone, there you go, bot, have access to my data. And then it's plastered all over the internet. Yeah, I think that is going to be the real watchword for AI. And that's where, right at the very beginning of the conversation, we talked about secured by design. We talked about segregation. It's applying that theory to how do I then let AI do its thing on my data, but in a secure and sovereign way.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit kind of between what Adam and Andrew were just saying there as well, back to our point of the kludge, right? That when we look at automation, it's going to be really tempting for organizations to give AI really big, complex, ugly things and say, can you automate this? But should you? Not could you? Because is that really big, ugly, complex thing something you really want in your business? Is it something you're going to want in your business 3 years from now? Granted, you've made it very easy to operate because that AI is doing it. But does it belong there in the first place? So I think that's that's going to be, almost, if you will, the poison temptation of AI is, rather than address my technical debt, rather than design out complexity, rather than retire legacy systems, I'm going to go, oh, that big ugly thing is fine because the AI does it. And now I've got an even worse skills gap, an even worse knowledge gap, because that big, ugly, complicated thing that was barely manageable when I had a trained human doing it is now a black box, completely dependent on that vendor over there. And we've never, ever seen vendors go, oh, by the way, that product you really depend on doesn't exist next quarter. Find something else.
Yeah.